Hello everyone, let's take a look at virtualization. What is virtualization? Before we get into explaining the concept of virtualization, let's take a look and understand of how physical system configuration works. So, in a regular world, as you could see, there is a physical server. A physical server could be like a Dell or HP or any of those manufacturers that build a physical server. On that physical server, what do you do when you get that physical server? You actually install an operating system on top of it. And that operating system could be Windows, could be Linux, or any of the operating system of your choice, right? Then what happens? You install the operating system, and then on top of that operating system, you run your applications. Those applications are, for example, Excel, Word in Windows world, in Linux world, you'll run like a DNS application, NTP application. In a regular applications, where rarely enterprise level application like ERP, SAP, PeopleSoft, all of those applications run on on that platform where the operating system is. So this is how you see an ideal or in a regular world how the layout works. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem with this is you have a physical server. The physical server has 16 gig of RAM and 4 CPU. And then you install operating system on top of it. Operating system only needs 4 gig of RAM and 2 CPU to run. And then you install an application on top of it, and that application only needed 2 gig of RAM and 1 CPU for that application. What happens then? Then you have 8 gig of RAM and 2 CPU that are wasted. Yes, resources are underutilized. That's why the virtualization was born. People thought, they sat down, they said, you know what? We have this physical server with so much resources. We only run one operating system and one application, and everything else is wasted. We gotta come up with a better solution. So now let's look at the virtualization. When virtualization came into being, then what happened? What happened was there's a physical server, same way, running Dell on HP, whichever whoever the manufacturer is. Then you install a virtualization layer on top of it. A virtualization layer from anywhere, like from VMware, from Oracle Virtualization. Then you install operating systems on it. So you could install 2, 3, 4, how many operating system you can, depending on the resources that you have on the physical system. And then on top of those operating systems, you have the application individually run on each of that operating system. Now, what's the advantage? Let's look at the advantage. That's a physical server. Again, going back to 16 gig of memory and 4 CPU, you install a virtualization layer which takes up all your CPU memory and CPU. Perfect. Then that operating systems you have, then applications, each of that operating system application has 4 gig and 1 CPU. So each of that operating system has given all those resources. What happens then? All resources are fully utilized, not wasted. See how we could take the full advantage of all those resources? So again, one more thing. Remember those days when you have one physical server and one operating system, and then people came up with another idea of, you know what, split the disk in half and let's do dual boot. So one of the partition would run, let's say Linux, and one partition would run Windows. But the problem was with that is you could run only one operating system at a time. In virtualization, this is the beauty of the virtualization. You don't have to have one operating system run at one given time. You could run both or 3 or 4 operating systems at all times, all at the same time. That's why the virtualization is so important and so beneficial. Again, in layman's term, virtualization is something is really not real, but it is actually real. It is utilizing the system resources and sharing those system resources among all the operating system that runs on that physical server.